The sponsor of this episode is Chadwell Supply, an OG in the multifamily industry. Chadwell Supply is the largest privately owned maintenance and repair supplier, and they deliver orders the next day from local warehouses across the United States. To find out how Chadwell Supply will make your day better, visit www.chadwellsupply.com/difference.
All right. Hello, friends. We're live with another episode of Optimized, a marketing performance podcast. I'm Janet Rosseth, your host and 25-year veteran of multifamily marketing. And we're bringing you this session today in hopes that we can bring you a 1% improvement across either your personal or professional life with all sorts of tools and resources that generate ideas. And today, our guest is Anne Baum from Town Properties. I'm excited to have you here today, Anne. Hello.
Hi, it's good to be here. Thank you. I'm flattered and honored to be here with you.
I'm excited to have you here as well. Just a little intro on how you and I got connected. I actually met you at the AIM conference this year, just a couple of months ago, and you delivered this fantastic session on, I think it was operators and marketers together on the journey and KPIs, and I was just fascinated by everything that came out of that session, and thankfully got the opportunity to meet you after it. And we have stayed connected ever since and had a lot of conversations. And then we both had sessions at NAA, and it just seemed like the perfect fit to come and bring you out on the Optimized podcast because you are, I think, a self-titled data nerd, right?
Yes, I am. I say data is my middle name, which I don't have a middle name, so it's like very convenient that data is now my middle name. And it's actually funny because I found a presentation I did like 6 or 7 years ago, and I'd put one of those Bitmojis in there, and it basically says like, data, you get me. And I was like, oh my gosh, even back then, that data was my friend, and it was something that I really gravitated towards. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I think that title is fitting for sure.
I think that's one of the coolest things as a marketer when you figure out really what your sweet spot is.
Yes.
I was having this conversation with the panel group that I presented with at NAA too, that some people are mathy marketers and some people are creative marketers and some people are data minded. And when you know what your style is, you really know where you can have the biggest impact and surround yourself with a team that kind of offsets the rest.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with you. And I actually always laugh when people will say to me like, well, what do you think about insert pretty thing here? I'm like,
me too.
Yeah. But thank you for
I know what I like and
but...
don't like, but it's very hard for me to articulate. And if you put Canva in front of me, I'm literally allergic to it. I'm like, I don't get it. I don't know. I really like to surround myself with the creative people who can bring those ideas to life that came out of my mathy side.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, tell us, take us through the beginning. Who's Anne? What's your story? And how in the world did you end up in multifamily?
Sure. So, my story is I started in marketing at an agency in Denver, and we ran at the very beginning, I was running Google ads for clients. And then we ended up getting a franchise client. And then we got another franchise client. And so I was fortunate enough, the company I was with kind of recognized that specializing in franchise systems would be a good opportunity. And so I was lucky enough to be involved in building out their paid search program specifically for franchise systems. And I was there for about 10 years. And I was very fortunate. I worked with brands like Fast Signs and Batteries Plus Bulbs. It used to be Batteries Plus, but then they added the Plus Bulbs. We were part of that. Very cool.
Very exciting stuff.
Edible Arrangements, Smashburger, just some larger names. And so that was really a great experience. But through that, I realized twofold. One, I had a plethora of experience in businesses that have multi-locations. Two, you have to be proficient in data in order to kind of analyze performance across sometimes 300-400 campaigns, depending on the size of the franchise system. And then three, I realized that I was really good at building things. And so my career then has been about building things, departments, service offerings, and it's typically paired with working at a company that has multiple locations. So I've been fortunate enough, I've worked with nonprofits. I worked at a reverse logistics company where basically what that is the company was buying returns from like Amazon and Target and then reselling it to consumers through an auction platform. And there were multiple pickup locations across the states. And then I had the opportunity to come work at Town Properties, again, a multi-location business, right? And they were in a position where they had a wonderful marketing leader and she was set to retire. And Town Properties wanted to go in the direction of starting to harness all of the data that existed within the company regarding how marketing was performing, and then also someone who had experience with digital marketing in general, and bring that in to rethink what did the marketing practice look like at Town Properties. And so that's how I ended up here about 5 years ago.
That's such a strong vision. I really applaud them for doing that work to identify what they wanted to start, stop, and keep.
Yes.
And having the opportunity to fill that major key role and create it a little bit differently than they'd had in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. I was fortunate, and I was fortunate that it was like it was meant for me based on my career story and based on what I was really passionate about. And so the fact that the opportunities and the timing aligned was just really special.
Yeah. And you've been there for how long?
Almost 5 years. 5 years in September. I've learned so much. I've gone through a huge learning curve. I know you talk a lot about people falling into the industry, and kind of once you're in, you're in. And I basically am a walking cliche of someone who fell into the industry, and I really enjoy it. I really, really do. And I've met amazing people. Again, something you talk a lot about is about building a network. And I feel like over the past several years, I've been really fortunate to build up a strong network in the multifamily space, specifically in marketing.
Yeah.
And I couldn't be more grateful for that.
I think it's ever changing too. We've talked about there's a couple kinds of marketers that land in this industry. One is that person who makes eye contact from a site level position, and all of a sudden they're thrown into a marketing role to sign a few ad listing contracts and, maybe help create a few brochures for properties. And, fast forward several years and it's like, wow, this position got really big really fast, and you're still trying to do that same small administrative role, but you're also being expected to tackle strategy too, and it can be really challenging. And then there's the role that gets hired in like you, where you're brand new to this industry and all the nuances of it, but you have a really good handle on marketing and data and overseeing a department. So it's fun when you put all those people in a room together and learn from each other. And like I said, I'm 25-year veteran in this industry, but I love connecting with newbies in this industry because I learned so much from you and from, that 25-year-old, pretty fresh out of college, just tackling a marketing position. Like, they are the closest thing to actual renters. And it's so fun to hear all the different perspectives in this industry and all the different ways the different companies here in this industry tackle marketing. It's really interesting.
I agree with you. Yes. Actually, we have a couple of new folks on our team, and both of them are from outside of the industry, and it's been really fun to watch them learn and kind of grasp concepts. And now I keep saying to them, like, oh, well, one day, I'm saying all those things now, like, well, one day you'll just, it'll be in your head, like the entity numbers will be in your head, or I don't know, some random like institutional knowledge thing. And
I know, like all the acronyms, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's like a rite of passage when you actually know what all the acronyms mean.
Yeah, no, I know. And but then I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel so ridiculous saying that. But I'm like, literally, I promise you one day it will happen. But anyway, they don't believe me, but then it'll happen. They'll be like, oh my gosh, you were right.
So take me through your first year at Town and knowing that you were coming into this role and tackling it from a data perspective that maybe wasn't there before.
Yes.
How did you start? How did you get started? How did you organize your approach?
Yeah, it was crazy. Not only had I not worked in multifamily before, I hadn't worked at a company this large before. Town Properties is over 900 people, and the
Wow.
largest, yeah, it's huge. We span 4 states, and so anyway, that it was like double learning curve. But really, I was fortunate enough to have a really great training plan, and so our director of training at the time had me go out and meet with each of the regional vice presidents and talk to them about kind of what tools they needed in order to make good marketing decisions for their properties. And so that was really the first step, was just going out and talking to the regional vice presidents and asking them what they needed. And one of those conversations, I already had kind of marching orders, for lack of a better term, from my supervisor, but to hear then from the RVPs that they were needing kind of what matched what was expected of me already was very useful. And one of the best conversations I ever had was with an RVP named Eric, and he just retired. Actually, we had his retirement party on Friday, but we went and had lunch, and he brought a list to me, and he said, "Anne, this is what I need for marketing." And one of the things on that list was he wanted to understand the performance from a cost per lease standpoint for his individual marketing sources, which was something that I'd been working on for years. Google Ads, you can track me pretty easily. I was pretty proficient with Google Analytics and some other tools. And so that list that he gave me was really the catalyst to when I came to start in the office, what I really focused on. And I actually was able to finish his entire list. It took me about a year, but that was one of my proudest moments, to go back to him and be like, Eric, I think I've tackled everything on this list.
That must have felt so rewarding for him too.
It did. And he's that guy that you want. Like, I was so proud to go back to him because he had taken the time to put it together. But really what that looked like was, I had to understand how our marketing platforms worked, what they were, how much we were paying, what the contract terms looked like. And then I had to start digging into the data. And to make it easier on myself, I started from a portfolio level. So I was pulling data for our entire portfolio to start to understand, again, kind of like what marketing sources we were using and how they were performing portfolio wide. So that was like my very baseline.
I'm curious, on behalf of all marketers out there, how easy was it for you to find that data in the systems that you were using?
Okay, so it was, it was hard because also at the time we only had CRM for some of our properties. And so a lot of times I was hearing that maybe the data wasn't 100% accurate. And so then I kind of had to go with this philosophy of like, well, if the data is inaccurate here, I almost had to embrace a philosophy of like data and accuracy being okay, because if it was inaccurate one place, then it was inaccurate everywhere. Therefore, it kind of negated it and made it accurate. I don't know.
Right. You just kind of factor in a 30% flaw rate across the board.
Exactly. I'm like, okay, well, if X minus
This is our
Y
baseline. It's probably 30% flawed, but it's what we're going to run with.
Exactly. Thank you. You said that much better than me. I'm like, but I kind of had to embrace that philosophy. But it was it was easy to pull lead and lease data because I was able to go into our CRM, pull a conversion rate ratio report, across the portfolio, across a time frame. That was fine. But then I noticed that the GLs, we were having a budget. We were talking about budgets earlier, and the GLs that we were using weren't necessarily splitting out like the different types of marketing. And so that was actually one of my early initiatives was I created a couple more GLs, which then took a little while to educate. But anyway,
it honestly can be kind of challenging too, because the GL codes that exist in a lot of the accounting software systems don't necessarily account for whether or not our ad sources are um, internet based or pay-per-click based. And then you factor in also that each of these larger ad sources buy up a couple of smaller ad sources along the way. So the source code doesn't necessarily match the GL code.
Yeah, you know what? That's a very, very good point that I didn't think about.
There's
And
a lot of
then,
cleanup that happens.
yeah, we did. At least we were able to kind of break out the GLs a little bit. And the other thing that was interesting was that I was very used to real time data. So I was used to being able to log into. I'll use Google Ads as my kind of like go to,
Yep.
but I was able to log into Google Ads at any second of any day and basically have up to the minute information about how much had been spent, how many impressions, how many clicks, how many leads. So that was a learning curve for me too. So anyway,
Oh,
after
for sure, because
realizing,
the invoice doesn't get billed till after the month, and then it doesn't actually get put in until 5 days
yeah,
later, and then paid, and then maybe it gets allocated across 4 different sites. It's really messy.
it's very interesting. So I'm like, where's my real time? So to answer your question, it did take me a little bit of time to get the spend. I think I ended up, asking our partners to send me like contract terms and stuff like that. But yeah, that's kind of how we started, was just by putting together information that hadn't necessarily lived together before, putting data sets together that hadn't necessarily lived together before. And that was the beginning.
And then what was your scientific approach from there? Were you using data to improve a process or using data to break a process and rebuild it?
Yeah, so one of the processes that we broke was that previously we had been getting information from our at like contract renewal times. We were getting recommendations from our partners, our marketing partners, saying, hey, keep your packages the same or increase. But we weren't validating that. We weren't validating those recommendations based on our data. And so that was the first process that we rethought. We would get the recommendations in, then we would look at the performance from an individual property standpoint, and then we would marry those two things together. And we would say to the RVP, like, here's the recommendation from the marketing partner. Here's the performance from the past 6 months. Here's what we're recommending. What would you like to do? And that was very different, where previously the recommendations were just being sent to the regional vice presidents without additional context.
That sounds great. Wow, I bet that was so handy for the regional VPs to be able to make decisions.
It was, and they appreciated it, because ultimately, I know that every company is set up different, but at Town, the power is really with the regional vice presidents. They are responsible for their portfolio. They do a wonderful job. They're responsible for managing owner relationships. Like, they are Town out on the field. And so it's our responsibility to help them make great decisions for their
Right.
properties and for their owners. And so I think that they were grateful. And it was interesting, because there were some nuances that I had to learn from a marketing standpoint. When I first started, I think I was kind of giving out cost per application. Like, I was thinking about it from like a cost per application, because I had made the assumption that application and lease were interchangeable. And
Yep.
I learned, like, no, actually there's, a decline rate or a cancel rate. And so that was
Yeah.
interesting too. So it took a little bit, it took a little bit of time to get the process of what information we were sharing and how we were sharing it right, so that I
Right.
was
I mean,
speaking
in
the
that
same language.
scenario, both are important because, we're running for a lot of the clients I talk to right now are running a 40% fallout
Yep.
ratio on applications. And you kind of hope that you can use your advertising and your marketing to really hone in on that quality lead so that you can reduce the fallout rate on the application. So it's like you do want that data, but then you also want to measure it from actual lease and who actually showed up on move-in day.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes. Who's bringing
yeah,
revenue into you? So, but yeah,
yeah,
that like I said, that was the very first kind of process that I remember
Yeah.
reimagining by being able to use data.
So from there, you probably found some of your baselines, and then you went into KPI mode, which for any listeners who don't know KPI, it's Key Performance Index.
Yes.
What were some of the first things that you put into place to measure?
Really, it was after I realized that applications and leases were different. It
We
was
wish they
really,
were the same.
yeah, they should be the same. But after I learned that, then it really became about looking at the cost per lease and the conversion rate for our sources.
And I'm sure that once you started collecting the data on that, you started seeing areas where you could pull levers to improve it.
Yes,
Which sets the
absolutely.
KPIs. And then you probably know my theory in this industry for marketers, that becomes a little bit challenging because as marketers, we're often responsible for changing behavior and guiding behavior across the portfolio, but none of the end reliant roles actually report to us.
Yes.
So we're responsible for changing how those applications get approved or the volume of leads that turn to leases, but those leasing agents don't report to us. So tell me how you went about that. How did you kick off? Here are the KPIs. Here's the measurement we're looking for. Here's what we hope you're achieving. And then how do you nudge that performance?
Sure. So the first couple years, it was really just about educating the regional vice presidents and learning from them as well about the tools that were available. We have really an extensive list of services that we can provide and channels that our properties can market on. And so the first couple years, it was just about, listen, we see, for example, one of my favorite things was that our websites were producing 54% of the leases, but we weren't really utilizing SEO and pay-per-click. Unlike, in my opinion, pay-per-click and SEO should be a part of every property's marketing strategy. Like that should be baseline. Pay-per-lease, SEO, pay-per-click should all be there no matter what. And then you start layering in additional
in
tactics.
actuality, if it's not part of the marketing spend budget and you're getting 54% of your leases from your website, you can pretty much assume it's because your apply online button is there.
Right. And so but we were like, well, but we're not even encouraging more people to go to our website. So how do we make sure that we're getting more traffic to our website to take advantage of the fact that our website does convert at a higher level than some of the other marketing sources? So that was the conversation for a little bit. And then we started getting more and more properties on SEO and pay-per-click. And then, so once we felt like, listen, we've talked a lot about the marketing tools that we have available, how these sources convert from a general standpoint, and then we were getting asked to provide that data kind of on a property by property basis as well, because it does change. We see the cost per lease change from different marketing sources based on the property. And so it is important. The portfolio level was our baseline, changing general behaviors like putting digital marketing into play, and then starting to make sure that we were doing the right thing on a property by property level. Like they kind of were all happening together, but they were each steps that we needed to go through. And then really we were running into that kind of divide between marketing and operations on more of a like kind of a day-to-day. So a lot of the stuff that I just talked about, we were presenting that data either at like a contract renewal standpoint or like at an annual meeting with our regional vice presidents or on demand. But really we reached a point where we wanted to not necessarily be reacting, but we wanted to be partners with them all the time. And so
I love that perspective.
Yeah, it was, again, we had to do other stuff before we could get to that place. But what we ended up doing was putting together to address what you just mentioned. It's like marketing is responsible for bringing in the leads, but once they hit the property, there are so many factors that are out of marketing's control, but we weren't having those conversations. Like one of my favorite examples is the Google rating for properties. On a monthly basis, we were sending a report to our RVP saying, like, here's your Google rating. And sometimes we would say, like, maybe you didn't get any, but we weren't explaining why that was important. We weren't explaining how a Google rating below 4 can impact traffic levels. Like, your traffic will decline if you don't have a good rating. And you love Google My Business. I know you love Google
I do.
Profile. Yeah, they're free.
I'm like getting super excited about this portion of the conversation because I think that is one of the case studies that I really want to see come to life in this industry is the impact of a score above 4 and below 4, because I think it does become a deal breaker.
Yeah.
It's a big deal for a property to even make the cut on a prospect's shortlist, and then to actually be one that gets toured, and then to be one that is considered applying. And along that whole process, prospects are reading your reviews and gauging how other residents have experienced living at your property. So it is incredibly important. And if your reviews are old and unresponded to and the volume's not increasing, it's not just that Google cares, your prospects care.
Chadwell Supply is the proud sponsor of Multifamily Media Network. Chadwell Supply is the largest privately owned MRO supply company and is committed to the multifamily industry. They deliver orders the next day from local warehouses across the United States. Chadwell Supply offers valuable resources such as maintenance training, a dedicated renovations team, and procurement platform assistance, ensuring multifamily properties operate more efficiently. Now, by partnering with Chadwell Supply, they'll help communities stand out in an increasingly competitive market. So learn more at chadwellsupply.com/difference.
They do, and they're going to have a different expectation of your property. Like, I guess it's not 100% fair of me to say, like, if you have a 3.5 or something below a 4, you're not going to get any traffic. But then an expectation might be that your rent range is lower than a property that has a 4-point rating. So there are certain expectations that come along with that rating. But anyway, we weren't talking about that. We were just like, you have to be above a 4. And so we recently, this year, we started a process where to align marketing and operations, and for us to really be a partner for our regional vice presidents, we put together a shared marketing and operations KPI dashboard, which is something you referenced earlier. We spoke about it at AIM, but that's been a lifesaver for us because we're talking about things like trend, we're talking about renewal rates, we're talking about average days vacant, we're talking about conversion rates, we're talking about shop scores, we're talking about Google ratings, we're talking about rent range compared to the benchmarks. And so now we're able to sit down. So what used to happen, an RVP would be like, oh my goodness, this property is at 85% help, right? And we'd be like, okay, here are some some things that we can do to get you more traffic. We would also be noticing operational things that we maybe, and this was a flaw on our part, we maybe didn't feel comfortable talking about. Like we might be like, gosh, their rent is kind of high, or gosh, their rating's low. For whatever reason, we didn't express
tell the story,
that.
right?
Yeah, the facts tell the story.
It's hard to point those things out when you feel like a person on the other end might take offense to it, or, marketing doesn't want to throw operations under the bus, and operations wants to protect leasing, and we're all at the end of the day trying to achieve the same goals.
Of course.
I guess my perspective is always like data tells the story. And if it's a good starting point where you can look at a dashboard and you can look at the facts and start there, I think it's always really important to invite the human conversation behind all those data points. Like, why I'm seeing this number. Why do you think this is happening?
Exactly.
Leasing team, tell me more. What are you experiencing? Rather than just assuming, oh, you guys are only responding to 12% of your calls right now. Way to sleep on the job. And actually you invite them into the question and they're like, we are having so many problems with our phone.
Right. Yeah. Like, oh, the phone. And honestly, Janet, I think that that's amazing because we have heard that. And, or a lot of times we learn about rent, like, well, unfortunately, the owners have a certain rent range written into documents with the bank, and we can't do anything about it. And we're
Yep.
like, cool. Okay, well, now that we know that information, like, then let's talk about other aspects that can improve the perception of that community so people feel okay paying more than they might at a competitor. And so this shared marketing operations dashboard has been a lifesaver. We meet with each regional vice president on a monthly basis, and we go through, we prioritize by trend. We don't always talk about all the properties, and then it's beautiful. We each leave
That's
with
like
an
the greatest
action.
thing when property just like flies under the radar for a long, long time because their health score is just exactly where it needs to be to stay consistent.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I feel like we're not really going to be in a place where all of a sudden we're going to be surprised because we are watching the trend where we're saying like, okay, within 60 days, what is the occupancy going to be? And so it's just, yeah, that was a very long answer to your question.
No, I think that there are probably, if there are listeners out there in the marketing seat, there are probably a lot of them that are having like huge amounts of envy right now that you have a BI dashboard and some business intelligence to read the data and make these decisions and not have properties end up on your watch list randomly all of a sudden when we know it's not all of a sudden. It doesn't happen suddenly. It happens over the course of time. And, it starts with something as simple as your reputation is not where it needs to be. And then, rent levels, everybody in your market is reducing rents or offering concessions, and you stalled out and didn't react to that. And all of a sudden you got more notices than you anticipated. And that's when there's an all of a sudden problem that you can't fill them. And it's not a sudden problem. It was coming for a while, but without the dashboard, it's hard to see.
Yeah. And without the open communication,
yeah,
that's to me, the biggest part is that we could have always have sat down and met and, kind of talked, but both of us looking at data, the same data, the data that the regionals care about, not us, like, oh, your click-through rate went down, or I don't know, some random marketing. Like we don't. Anyway, yeah. So that's been a lifesaver, and I think it's just going to continue to. The data is not complicated that we're using. It's stuff that existed already, but. I'm excited. I don't know what the evolution of that process is going to be yet, but I know it will continue to evolve, and I'm excited about that.
Yeah. I mean, just thinking about it from, my lens of always trying to improve by 1%.
Yes.
You think about all the areas that you can inspire and encourage your teams, your on-site teams to improve. And what would the impact be if they improved by 1% in each of those areas on the dashboard? If they improve by 1% on their reputation score or 1% on their lead to tour rate, which then has an impact on the tour to applied, which then has an impact on the tour to leased. It just really, I think when you have that data and it's easy to put the simple math behind that, it's really easy to inspire people.
Yeah, I agree.
I used to love too at a former company when we first rolled out Yardi CRM. I think that's what you guys use, right?
Yes. Yep.
We first rolled it out and we were just able to see more data, and there were things that I was pulling and reporting that made it really, really interesting to learn. Like even the prospect portals, we did some data behind, okay, so if everybody pays electronically, exactly how many hours does that save out of the assistant manager's role that they're able to apply to something else that's more service minded? And then we were able to track work orders, and we started documenting how many work orders were completed each month across the portfolio and celebrating the maintenance teams, because when they're just out there doing their work out of sight, out of mind, nobody's really realizing how hard they're hustling all day long. But when you give a cute little report that looks like an infographic to organization that says, hey, here's what leasing teams accomplished, here's how many leads they responded to last month. Do you realize how many leads that is? And then if they follow up 6+ times with every one of those, look at them go. And your maintenance teams, like data, I just think speaks volumes to inspire people and motivate people and celebrate the work they do. And help just tweak a little bit to make it even more valuable.
Yeah, that's interesting. I love that. I've always thought about it as telling a story about a situation as it
Yeah.
exists currently. I've not really thought about it in the terms that you just mentioned. Like, how do we then use this to celebrate the people who are doing the work? And I love that.
Yep.
So
Yep.
thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a
And
really,
sometimes when you celebrate that, it's really easy to shift it back to them too and say, I hate to say it, but if it's not in Yardy, it didn't happen. So if you're telling me you don't need to be open on weekends because there's not enough traffic, then the story's not being told for me to back that up.
right.
If it's not in Yardy, right?
Yes, if it's not in
Yeah.
our source of truth,
Yep,
our
exactly.
data source of truth, then yeah.
Whichever property management software that is.
Yep, of course,
Agnostic to
yes.
all of them, right? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Yeah, so
that's
it does I love when data tells a story, and I love when marketing is math, and when you can start making decisions based on the math that you're learning and just pull that lever one direction or the other a little bit differently and see what happens.
yes, I agree with you.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially coming into budget season. We just had a conversation earlier today about budget season, and there are just a lot of conversations that have to happen in terms of how we support sales teams and how we support leads. And some of that comes exactly out of data. How
Yeah.
many conversations, how many leads are coming into your pipeline? And if you don't have the time to follow up, what do we need to deploy? Do we need another leasing agent, or do we need a nurturing software?
Right.
Do we need to turn back the lead volume? Is the lead volume not even the issue? It really speaks volumes.
Yeah, absolutely. We had that happen a couple years ago where we needed to turn off a high volume lead source at some of our sites that only were staffed by a single person because the conversion rate was so
Yeah.
low that it was like consuming their time, and it wasn't
Right.
it wasn't
And
right.
it's probably not a
So
great experience for the prospect either, if it's really tough for that team to get back to them on a timely manner.
yeah,
I'd rather have quality over quantity any day.
yeah, no, me too. And
Yeah.
it'd be draining. That's not. It's just because you have to know, like, oh, this lead source, gosh, these hardly ever turn into leases, but yet here I am responding,
Yep.
and
Yep.
so we use
Exactly.
automation now, so it's
Yeah.
we're able to have. It's actually interesting because now that we use automation from like a lead response standpoint, the conversion rate has become a little less important to me than it was previously because all leads are being handled equally for the most part.
Right.
So that's I don't know. I thought about that recently. I was like, gosh, conversion rate used to be like my, the song that I was singing, and it's
But you fixed
taken a
that.
back seat a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's good. I imagine that in the process of unraveling all of this data and implementing KPIs, you probably faced a few obstacles along the way in leading teams towards this method of thinking.
mhm.
Can you talk a little about that?
Yeah, I can. I mean, I think the largest hurdle initially was my understanding of the industry and terminology. So that was one hurdle. And then I think I was kind of fast with how I wanted some things to change. So I think that at the beginning that those were probably two of my biggest hurdles was I was moving fast and not
Yeah.
100% understanding kind of all of the things. And I think selling my team on the idea of change and implementing new processes, and everyone is really different, which I don't mind trying things if they're not fully baked. uh I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
But not everyone is, and at such a large company that isn't necessarily like that's not really a fair philosophy. Like, we're changes that we might make impact so
Yeah.
many people. And so I had to shift my philosophy and my thinking a little bit to make sure that I was doing the right thing. Just because I thought something was the
Yeah.
right thing, it also had to be right for the company and hundreds of people that a change might impact. And so I've had to shift as a professional over the years, which has been
Yeah.
neat.
Sometimes you take a small
But yeah,
perspective from a couple of different people, or a small set of properties that become your testing ground on new theories. And they know that they're going to be testing things. They know they're not always going to come to fruition, but they're the group that's willing to prove you right or wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm fortunate now too. My team, they like data. They're each exploring their own way, how to use it in order to make marketing better. And so that's really neat. But again, it took a couple years for sure for all of those things to come together.
Right. Yeah. Well, and now here you are presenting on KPIs all over the industry.
I'm
and
very
all of us are learning from you.
I'm
What's next
grateful.
on your radar?
Oh my gosh, there's like 5,000 things.
Let's go
So
through each of them.
yeah, let's go. I know. We have 10 hours. No, I know I told you one thing that I was excited about. Actually, so talking about budgets and talking about, aligning with RVPs and being more kind of property centric.
Yeah.
Our marketing strategist actually, this year will be putting together individual budgets for each of our properties based on past performance, and then based on expected occupancy in 2025. So basically, she's going to be looking at things like, for an individual property, how have sources historically performed? What is a property on or not on? And then she's going to be looking in 2025, in each month, how many lease renewals do they have coming up? On average, what is their lease renewal rate? And then based on that, how many leases will they need to get each month in order to maintain their
budgeting
goal
based on exposure rather than actual vacancy.
Yeah. And so this has been kind of on my mind for a while, and we talked about it, and she came up with a strategy, and she's going to go ahead and implement it for next year. And so I'm excited. I'm excited about that. That again is just like the
Makes
next
it so
step.
much easier to buy advertising when you know the seasons that you're going to need it most, rather than waiting to kick up the advertising till you know what your vacancy is, because it's too late then. When we get notices to vacate, we should have been advertising those units 2 months ahead of that.
Yeah, and again, it's not going to be, it'll be interesting, right?
30% flaw rate.
Yeah, exactly. 30% of the time it will work all the time, or none of it. But
yes, just for our listeners to know, I have no data to confirm the 30% flaw rate. It's just what I go with in my head.
Yeah, no, that was about accurate. But I think then we can even plan with our vendors, because we were talking earlier about planning with vendors and being transparent with them. And so I just think that this is going to open up a whole new way for us to operate as a team, and that's very cool. So that's a big thing on our list. The other two things, one, I think I told you we recently hired an optimization specialist, and her job.
I love that. I love that title.
I'm so happy she used to work at a casino, which is amazing, because outside of the industry, but she brings a fresh perspective. But what she was doing at the casino was looking at basically predicting how many people they would have in the casino on a given day based on events that were happening in the area, past data, etc. And then she was responsible for putting together promotions that would drive additional traffic to meet traffic demand. And so we brought her on board to basically look at how each of our marketing partners, ILSs, flat rates, etc., are performing, but not from a cost per lease standpoint, but how are the listings performing on those individual platforms? Meaning, for example, a flat rate ILS, how many times is a listing being viewed? How many leads are being sent in from that listing? What is the conversion rate? If that conversion rate is below the average of the conversion rates across all of our listings, then what needs to happen to that listing in order for it to perform better.
That's amazing. So she's going to be setting a lot of best practices and baselines for performance of those strategies so that you can improve upon them.
Yeah, yes.
So cool.
And it's so cool. And I think we felt like it was something we needed, that kind of like micro level. We were looking at things from a portfolio and a property level, but we needed to go one step further down to ensure that when RVPs and owners were entrusting us with their marketing budget, that it was performing as well as it could be. And so,
right. And that's sometimes the hazards of marketing departments in this industry is we are generally staffed so thin that we're just trying to keep everything moving. There's not a whole lot of time to go through and optimize it or make sure it's performing well or even make sure it's advertising the correct information.
Yep.
I was just in a LinkedIn conversation this morning about specials that are on websites that expire and nobody realizes it and they aren't taken down.
Yep.
It's a forced emotion to your prospect, right? We all do, but who's got time in the department to go through and audit every single one of those touch points that happen from a prospect view all the way through handoff?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And we had that actually happen this morning, and we were talking about it, and then so it's interesting because each company roles are different. So in our case, it's the site team's responsibility if they have a special to like put on the website, change pricing on a unit, etc. And so, but then when that happens, we feel bad because we're like, oh my gosh, like we want to help you, but then it's so there's this kind of disconnect. That would be something else, is figuring out like the how those two might disconnect, and how to bring like process together. But and then the final thing that's next is the Town Properties brand. Town Properties is such a special company. Our mission is to create great places to live, work, shop, and play. And we want to make sure that people know who Town Properties is and why we're a wonderful company for our residents, for our employees. And so I'm really focused on how do we get the word of Town Properties out, and how do we let people know that we're special. We all know we're special, but how do we let the United States know that we're special? And
more storytelling, more content.
Yep, more storytelling, more content. And that's a huge responsibility, but it's
a huge
also
undertaking.
Yeah, it's one I'm proud. I'm proud to do it, but it's daunting. So
that sounds like a very exciting year ahead for you.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I've got a great team, great company, and I just know we're gonna be able to continue to use data to do the right thing from a marketing perspective. So
I can't wait to watch it all unfold.
Thank you.
All right, I have a final question for you before we wrap up. I always ask every one of my guests, what do you do personally to optimize for yourself? How do you make sure that you're always on your game, or, if you're struggling or just need to fire yourself up, what do you do to optimize, Anne?
Sure. So I think twofold. I always like learning. I start books. I don't finish them. I get and I'm okay with that because
me too.
Yeah. Okay, good. I'm not even embarrassed. But right now, there's a platform called Coursera, and they offer, it's like $50 a month, and they offer college level courses, and then like Google has courses on there. And so right now I'm taking a certification to like a data analyst certification, and I don't know if I'm going to finish it, but
I feel like you should be teaching it.
Yeah, it's what I'm interested in at the moment right now, and so I do that. And then sometimes to be 1% better, I sometimes need to take a day off. And I can usually feel it. So that's the other thing, is that sometimes
a little rest and restore and reset.
Yeah. Sometimes I just need either a break or to kind of get out of a routine. We're all going, the team, we're all going to go visit a set of properties in like a certain region tomorrow, or no, on Wednesday actually. And I think that is going to recharge me. It's going to, So
that's always recharging for me, getting out on a property and seeing it in action, being around actual residents and leasing teams, and where the where all the action really happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just, it reminds us, it's like, oh, we're doing all of this for these properties so that people have great places to live. And so I'm excited. Plus, I got to rent like a really big SUV to drive everyone around. So I'm going to feel cool for the day. But I love your philosophy. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon, right? And so like the 1% better, what a great way to think about that. It's like just the little things that you do every day. So I love that.
It really is the little things you do every day. And I'm a big believer of, I had somebody give me advice when I first started running and I was frustrating with my first race performance. I'm not a racer. I'm talking like finish a 5K or show up at the starting line for a half marathon. Like I'm a runner. But it took me until this guy gave me this advice of just run your own race. Don't worry about passing everybody in front of you or how fast the person next to you is going or whether you've fallen behind of the pacer. Just run your own race and be happy with that. And that took me a minute because when you're a competitive person or you want to bring the best to your organization, you want to bring the best to your teams, you're just always trying to just go, go, go. And sometimes you just have to run the best pace for the company that you're with and the people that are on your teams and how your properties are staffed. And you might not be able to launch everything that everyone else is launching, but you bring the best for the people that are with you and just tackle it from there. And sometimes 1% better is not like I stack 1% on 1% on 1%. You know, it's not always the same focus. Sometimes my 1% is like, I just need 1 more hour of sleep tonight.
Yep.
Or I just need to drink a little more water in my day. Or I just need a little more time to get through my inbox before I start, doing other things. And just, there's always a new place to look.
Yes. It never ends.
Always a new perspective.
Absolutely.
Yes. Well, it has been such a pleasure talking to you today. Thank you so much for coming out on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you. This has been
I look forward
really
to following
fun.
your journey in town properties.
Thank you.
And for those of you who are still listening with us, thank you for listening to the whole episode. And I know you have tons of content out there to listen to. Podcasts are everywhere, but I appreciate you choosing this one and the Multifamily Marketing Network. Such a wealth of information between all the hosts that are out there, all the podcasts, the blogs, the content, the events. Thank you for tuning in. And if you like what you've heard, please give it a like, share, or pass it on to others. We appreciate that. And get to know other industry podcasters out on the platform and sponsorship opportunities. Anne, thank you so much. Everybody have a great day and go out and find that 1% better.
Thank you, Janet.
Thank you again to Chadwell Supply for sponsoring this episode. Chadwell Supply delivers unforgettable service with next day delivery, online and in-person maintenance training, procurement platform assistance to make your ordering simple. Visit chadwellsupply.com/difference to learn how Chadwell Supply will make your day better.